Well, the Scarlet Letter was written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, so we're going to go deeper in the author's biography. He was born in 1804 in Salem, and then after 4 years he moved to another place, and he lived there with his two sisters and his mother. So there are some people that say that he was really shy and introvert because of that, because he didn't have a male figure because his father died. Then after around 11 years he returned to Salem, and he prepared himself to college, and he entered in 1821. In 1825 he graduated half of his class, and he stated that the only thing that he wanted to be in life was to be an author. So he started writing and perfecting his writing. He spent around 12 years in isolation, in a kind of isolation in his mother's house. And it was in 1828, in fact, that he published his first work, which was named PIN518 Tale. He was not really proud of his work, so he attempted to buy all the copies because he didn't want anyone to read the novel. In 1838, he met Sophia, who was going to become his wife in 1842. At that time, they moved to Concord, Massachusetts, where they live in the now famous house, the Old Manse. In that place, he was always trying to work in different things in order to provide his family with a good quality life. That's why he was working as a surveyor in the port of Salem when he found a series of letters which were the base for the Scarlet Letter. He started writing the Scarlet Letter in 1849, in September 1849, and he finished it in February 1850, so it took him around 5 months to end the story, which is really amazing. Finally, he died in 1864. He was really sick, and he was traveling to find treatment, but he died in his sleep. Can you change it for me? Now we're going to go deeper in the cultural and historical background and also the setting. There's a kind of mixture between the themes presented here. It is important to say that the story was set in Boston at the 1640s, and in that moment there was a really huge Puritans movement. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper in the Puritans movement, because what they wanted to be, the Puritans wanted to purify church. They thought that the church was so influenced by the Roman Catholic Church, so they wanted to purify it. That's why they had this kind of particular beliefs. They believe that human exists only by the glory of God, so they had to follow, for example, the Bible, which was the thing that ruled them in their life. They also thought that the only way in which you can be a good person and be safe at the end and sent to heaven was by hard work and self-regulation. They also thought that all the people at that time was pervert because of the original sin. So there was no good person. You will know that till the end of your days. This story was mainly set in the forest and the town, and this is really important because the forest represents the freedom. That's why you can see in the movies and also in the book that the story develops in the forest, and is there in which Hester and Demoiselle live their love. Then we have the town, which represents the repression and the social judgment, because all the trials were set in the town. Hawthorne found two main inspirations, Hester Crawford and John Wedge, which were the main characters of the story, that are the real names, and also because of the Salem witch trials, and this has to deal with the background of Hawthorne's family. Salem witch trials were a series of persecutions and executions of people involved in witchcraft. So they killed around 20 people at that time, but then it was proved that that people was not involved in witchcraft. Hawthorne also discovered that one of his ancestors was involved and was one of the main judges in the trials. So he felt really guilty because he was related with these murderers. In fact, his real last name was Hawthorne without the W, but when he finished college, he added this W in order to not be related with his ancestors. And that also led us to guilt, which is one of the main themes through the story. He felt really guilty because of that.
Okay, so we have the genre. As you may have noticed, it's romantic, but it's also gothic. How can we see that? Because the story is not a typical Gothic story that we see castles and all the supernatural explicitly. In this case, we do not see it like that. But does it have mystery? It does. Does it have a deformed villain? Yes, because Shillingworth had a deformed shoulder and he was not pleasing to the eye. Does it have supernatural things? It does, so we will see that in the symbols afterward. And also, for a story to be Gothic, it has normally a female lead who seeks to know the truth of her existence and how she should kind of balance her own desire with what the people want. And we can see that clearly in this story. Involving all of that, we also can take it as a historical novel. Why? As Fernanda said, it's really about the Puritans, about what we've been seeing here in literature in the course, about settlement in America and how people traveled and all of that. So it's historical because it's set also many years before the author actually lived. So it's something that we can see, and it was something that really caught our attention was how the author portrays how people believed in the supernatural. Because in the story, there's no question why Dimmesdale actually gets this rash in his chest. They just assume it's because of something supernatural. They also, when they see a meteor that's coming from the sky, like in the shape of an A, or that the light is on Chester's baby, there's something that is so natural for them that there's no question about it. And what caught our attention was that the author portrayed this as something so normal in that time that no one questions it. Why? Because that was the reality. People just assumed that witches were witches and that ghosts actually existed. So he portrays that perfectly in this story. Because there were no question about if it was real or not. It was real for the people of that time. And it's psychological. Because we have this dilemma of the characters where they don't know if they want to see their emotions or their intellectual. What should I do? What's wrong? What's right? And he was one of the first authors to actually go deep down in that. And he actually said himself that it was a psychological novel. It also takes part into all of the different state of mind that we as human beings go through, as guilt and sin and all that, which we will later see in the themes.
Okay, so I will speak about the narrator. First of all, the narrator doesn't have a name. The narrator is presented in the first chapter, and he gets a job as a surveyor of the Salem Custom House, where he finds some manuscripts and a cloth of the Scarlet Letter, which finds that he burns it. Then the narrator is also third person omniscient, because he knows all about the characters, what they are feeling, what they think, etc. The narrator is also subjective because he gives his opinions about the characters. For example, he favors Esther's against the Puritans throughout the novel. There are some similarities between the author and the narrator. One of them is that both the narrator and the author worked as custom house officers. They both lost their jobs due to political changes, and they both had Puritan ancestors that they consider both a blessing and a curse. And lastly, Hawthorne sets up Hester in a way that parallels the narrator. For example, both feel alienated from the ones that surround them. And just like the narrator, they both feel like, for example, as Esther is reduced to a pile of paper and to a scarlet letter, the custom house officers feels that he will be reduced to a custom stamp. The tone. Well, the tone varies throughout the novel. In the first chapter, we can perceive that there is a gloomy tone because the prison and the cemetery are described as dark places. Then we have also detached and a skeptical tone. This is used when referring to the Puritans because the author doesn't have much feeling towards them. And he criticizes that they wanted an utopia, but the first places they built were a cemetery and a prison. And we have also irony that the author uses to criticize the community's opinion towards Hester.
Okay, so now we have the characters. You already know there are four major characters in the novel. First of all, we have Hester Prynne, who is married to Roger Chillingworth, right? But she has an affair with Reverend Dimmesdale, and this affair produces a daughter, Pearl. Hester plays many roles in the story. She is a devoted mother, an abandoned lover, a religious dissenter, and a feminist. Probably her most important role is the one of that an iconoclast, one who opposes established conventions. Established conventions criticizing the Puritan society. We can say that Hawthorne uses Hester to criticize the Puritans' strict society by portraying her as a woman of strength, independence, and kindness, and as someone who stands up to the judgments and constraints of her society. So in here, you can see she is being described as a rebel, right? But she's not just a regular rebel. She is a glorified rebel because she uses her innate strength to transform the meaning of her punishment. So then we have Roger Chillingworth. As you know, he's married to Hester Prynne. His real name is Roger Prynne, but he takes the name of Chillingworth when he arrives at the colony to keep his identity secret. Hawthorne created the man of science in Chillingworth, a man of pure intellect and reason with no concerns for feeling. Because of that, we can say that Chillingworth represents true evil, as he is associated with secular and sometimes illicit form of knowledge, as his chemical experiments and medical practices often verged on witchcraft and murder. Then we have Arthur Dimmesdale. As you know, he is the pastor of Hester's congregation and the father of Pearl. Of the four major characters, he is the only one who is a Puritan.
he is a symbol of the secret sinner, one who recognizes his transgression but keeps it secret and hidden even to his own downfall. So we cannot understand Dimmesdale without understanding the Puritans who inhabited Boston at that time. Puritans, as you know, did not believe that good works or moral living earned the salvation for the individual. So Dimmesdale struggles with the knowledge of his sin, his inability to disclose it to the Puritan society, and his desire for penance. Dimmesdale knows his actions have fallen short of both God's standards and his own. So he struggles that he may not find his own salvation. Then we have Pearl. Pearl is the illegitimate daughter of Hester and Arthur. She is the living manifestation of Hester's sin. She is being described as an intelligent, independent, intuitive child. More than a character, we can say that Pearl functions as a symbol of a constant reminder of her mother's adulterous act. So Pearl is also making the reader aware of her mother's Scarlet Letter and of the society that produced it. Pearl's innocent or perhaps intuitive comments about the letter raises crucial questions about its meaning. Pearl also functions as the conscience of Dimmesdale. As you know, he is constantly denying her and not taking responsibilities. So those situations makes Pearl realize what she needs to do, what Dimmesdale needs to do to find salvation. In her, Hawthorne created a symbol of great wealth because she's a combination of Hester's passion and intuitive understanding and her father's keen mental acuity.
So we have the themes, which are pretty connected to the symbols, which we will see after this. So we try to pick out the ones that are the most important ones. Because of course we have things like nature, we have things like the supernatural, which are really present in the romantic novels, like darkness and nature and solitude and all that. But we will focus on revenge. Guilt, blame, sin, hypocrisy, and femininity. So revenge. Where can we see the theme revenge in the novel? In the entire novel. Why? Because one of the main characters, as Michelle said, Shillingworth's only purpose in his entire life, after he finds out that his wife has cheated on him, is to seek revenge. And you can also see it on the Shilling name that he shows, Shillingworth, that he is the characterization of evil. So, his only purpose is to seek revenge, no matter what. So much that he keeps this going for 7 years, keeping his enemy alive for 7 years. And as soon as he dies too. So his only purpose was to seek revenge. We also have guilt and blame, as you saw in the short abstract of a play that we did, that the Puritans loved to blame. It was one of the main things. They blamed and they also felt guilt. Which leads us to the other themes, which is sin and hypocrisy, which actually is kind of self-explained. But guilt and blame, who felt the most guilt? As my classmate said, it was Dimmesdale, because he felt so much guilt for something that he did, which he cannot say to anyone, because he committed a sin which is forbidden in the community he is in. So he felt this, okay, so she's suffering, why am I not suffering? And so the guilt follows him throughout the entire novel until he dies. So then we have sin, as I already said. Everything is about sin. Everything is about pointing fingers at different people on what you have done, what is wrong, what will actually lead you to the after death kind of glory. You should not sin, and adultery was one of the biggest sin you can do. So of course, this is one of the main themes of the story. And hypocrisy. Well, let's just take the Puritans into account, because the Puritans really did things behind closed doors, but as long as they were outside, if no one knew, it was okay. And also, Dimmesdale, hypocrisy, that he was admired by people, but he had done and committed one of the greatest sins you could do. And femininity is one of the most interesting ones, because the author focused on that, and he gave us all kind of different women. In the story, we have all from witches to compassionate women, and we have Hester, which is something in between, which kind of the regular heroine, or the regular women which will not stand to be oppressed. So of course he had some thoughts that women did some repulsing things, but at the same time he really focused on a character that was strong and that men could not live without, because you can see how the characters ended because of her, because they needed her.
So now we have the symbols. As we were discussing last class, symbols were a fundamental part of Romanticism, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So because of that, the Scarlet Letter is a pioneer novel for the use of symbols. In fact, it is regarded as the first symbolic novel to be published in the United States. What's peculiar about it is that the author uses several symbols, but each symbol can have different meaning depending on the character's beliefs and the character's personal experiences. So now we'll be discussing the four most important ones. First of all, we have the Scarlet Letter. The Scarlet Letter was meant to be a symbol of shame, but instead it is a symbol of power that represents the identity of Hester. Not only the A appears in various occasions, but it also acquires different meanings. Originally, it was intended to mark Hester as an adulterer, but for Hester, the A was a symbol of unjust humiliation. As we go through the novel, we can see that the A symbolizes other things than adultery. For example, it symbolizes angel when it appears in the sky one night, and it also symbolizes Abel when years after the public humiliation, Hester has won some respect from the Puritans. Then we have the meteor. As Dimmesdale stands one night on the scaffold with Hester and Pearl, a meteor flashes a nail across the sky. Dimmesdale feels this means that he should be wearing a nail in his chest because a man cannot escape from his sins. But for the town people, it meant that the A was a symbol of angel in honor of Governor Winthrop's death. So in here you can see how one symbol can have two opposite meanings. Then we have the marks on Dimmesdale's chest. Dimmesdale's mark is an outward manifestation of inward corruption and hypocrisy. This mark was intended to mark him as a sinner, and it was also to help him to relieve his guilt. But we can see that at the end, as deeper the mark got in here, his guilt was even more, until the point it killed him. And finally, we have the forest. The forest has two opposite meanings. The one of a moral wilderness and the loving embrace of nature. For the Puritans, the wild was a terrifying place filled with wild animals, Native Americans, and a place where you could find witches and Satan. But for Hester, Dimmesdale, and Pearl, the forest was the place where they could talk to each other, and the place where they could make plans for better days to come. In here, they could express the real love that they felt for each other, and they could also show her inside out and what they were feeling at that time.
So now we have the literary devices. One of the main ones is allegory, which means that there is a more deep and abstract idea behind something. For example, in this quote, we can see that the author develops Hester develops the idea that Hester loses her individuality, and her only role becomes that of representing sin. Through that quote, he also tries to convey that the Puritan notions of judgment were wrong. The next one is personification, and this is represented through a rosebush, which grows in the prison door. And the author gives this rosebush human qualities when he adds the quality of empathy, as we can see here, that the rose could feel pity and be kind to him. And the last one is allusion, when we can see that Chillingworth is compared to Satan, because as my classmate said, he was so focused in his revenge that he kind of lost himself. And when Dimsel dies, he lost everything, and he dies too because he doesn't have a purpose anymore. And that's the end.
That's the end of our presentation. So, any questions? Yes?
I have a comment. I remember a movie that I watched a long time ago, but it was in a modern context. What?
You see it.
I
It
don't
was with
really.
Emma Stone.
Yeah, that one. So it is really right. So
Yes, it is an inspiration.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't really remember the story of that. I just remember that the main character had an implant on her chest.
Because everyone were talking behind her back because there were rumors that he had slept with someone. So, because
Right.
everyone were talking behind her back and shaming her, she decided to do it herself. Okay, if you want to shame me, I'm here, I committed a sin in your eyes, so just blame it on me.
Yeah,
So
But-
that's the focus
But
of
the
it.
difference is that she wasn't guilty, but the one in your story was.
yeah, but Hester wasn't guilty either. She didn't love her husband, and he was supposedly dead. But what's important about that movie is that the main character in there actually adopts the Hester's strength to stand up in front of the entire community that is judging her.
Yes, and about her being a sinner or not, it really depends on the point of view. Because from, kind of say, our point of view in our society nowadays, most people would say that it's committing a sin anyways, to cheat on your husband. But in that time, they did not marry for love. And actually in the preface, the author says that he wants to say what love is all about. And marriage. Marriage is not about marrying someone because it's convenient. Marriage is about love. So he wants to state that clearly. If you marry someone, it has to be for love. So he wants to put that into focus in this story because he's all about Hester being with the man that she loves. So in the author's eyes, is not guilty at all. She just did what she did because she was in love, and love is above everything.
And I think that she didn't feel guilty at all. I think that the other one feeling guilty was Dimmesdale because he didn't recognize what he did. Instead, he let all the people blame Hester for what they committed together. So I think that guilt is more present in Dimmesdale character than in Hester.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that this novel is very interesting because it helps us see and reflect about the moral aspect, how a person can be judged from a sin that she has been committed, that people can see her from different perspectives, and how, for example, Chillingworth became so focused on the idea of revenge that he, in the end, became the evil one.
Yes, but also the author states that it's really, really important to know that God is the only one who can judge you.
So taking into account what you said, it's like Hester was trying to like protect the priest, and at the same time his husband, I don't know, former husband.
Yes, she cares for both of them.
Yeah, actually she tried to help in a certain way to set up this kind of vengeance towards the priest.
Yes, but he discovers anyways who he is, and he seeks revenge on him by actually making him live for 7 years before he actually dies.
Yeah, I have a question. How was religion depicted, and how is religion nowadays in relation to the story?
Well, religion at that time was really strict. They followed strict codes. The Puritans, they couldn't make anything to find salvation when they died. They just were destined to go to hell or go to heaven. So for them it was really difficult to understand others' perspectives than the ones they were taught.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, they followed strictly the Bible because that is a place or the book in which you can find God's will. So you had to follow it and do strictly what is written there. And as Michelle said, it was really confusing because at the end you didn't know at that time if you were being good or bad, if you're going to be sent to heaven or hell, because you will know it at the end of your days when you die. The only thing that you can do is to self-control yourself, self-regulate of committing sin at the end.
But nowadays, in the present, we have all sorts of religions. So it all depends on how you see your own life. The thing is that there's more acceptance. There's not like one that is predominant over the other, of course, depending on the country. But if you are, for example, from a specific religion in a context like in ours, you won't be judged like in that time. You have your own perspective, and it's okay. But in that time, it was a sin not to actually follow, because she was not a Puritan, but she got judged because of what they thought was wrong or right.
Yeah, but in relation to the way that Christendom acts, I mean, the priests, the Catholic Church, not the people in general.
Okay.
I think that it's in some way hidden, like we're living in the same kind of way, but in a hidden way. Because in that time, they show what was the sin committed by, for example, history in this case. All the people knew what was happening and what she did. But nowadays, they try to hide this because in that way, people is going to still following the religion they want to. They want to still, for example, in the Catholic Church, we have noticed, and at least I have watched through news, all these priests who has committed sexual harassment to little kids, but it was hidden through many years, and now that they are 14 or 15 maybe, 50 maybe, they are just revealing what happened back at that time. But I think that is hidden, and we are not, and we judge people, but in a hidden way.
It's hypocrisy.
Yes.
And we can see, for example, in the abortion law, that people try to include religion. For example, many years ago, the single moms were criticized too. So,
okay, there's no more time, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I had a comment.
Okay.
Yeah, Robert, congratulations on your presentation. It was
thank you.
clear and well explained.
Thank you.